Thank you everyone for joining us this morning for Healesville Core's Home Energy Efficiency webinar. Great to see you all here. I checked our database a short while ago and we had 64 people registered, which is a fantastic turnout, and really good to be able to present to you today. This is a very difficult time, as we all know, with the COVID-19 lockdown. There's an awful lot of suffering in our community. People who have lost jobs, are losing jobs, people having difficulty paying their rent, paying their bills, and some people also having difficulty even putting food on the table. It's an extremely difficult time, and I hope we get through it really quickly. Healesville Core can't do a lot to help out in these sorts of circumstances, but we can do a little bit, and that's what we are trying to do on the energy front as well, collectively. We have major problems with the planet, major problems with COVID-19. Each of us can do just a little bit. If we work locally and think globally, we can all collectively have a very big impact. And that's one of the things that we aim to do, and hence we're running a seminar today. But before we go any further, I would like to acknowledge the Indigenous people on whose land we are located today in Healesville. That's the Wurundjeri people. They're the traditional custodians of this land. And I'd also like to pay respects to the elders, both past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous people, Indigenous Australians who might be present today. I'd also like to say a thank you to the Yarra Ranges Council, who made it possible for us to have this seminar today. They provide funding for Healesville Core with a grant that enables us to run our events during the year. And it's been fantastic to have their support over the past 3 or 4 years, including for this webinar today. Also like to thank our speakers, Alan Pears and Glenn Newman, both very busy people, and they've made themselves available to share their experience with us today. And it's a Saturday morning as well, so thank you very much for that. And Tom Bazelier is in the background, our tech man. Tom has been helping us in the run-throughs we've been having before this event, and he's in the background ensuring that all the technical stuff runs well today. And it's great to use technology to be able to keep this connection together with each other in the community. So normally at this point in the proceedings, I would point out to people in an auditorium where the exits and the toilets are, but I guess there's no need to really do that today. What I would like to do is just give you a little bit of a background briefing on Healesville Core for those of you who aren't all that familiar with the organisation. We're a voluntary group of people from the Healesville area. We were established in 2017, and we're working really hard to try to transition Healesville to become what's called a net zero town by 2027. And our focus is not on net zero across the whole of the town, but particularly in the electricity sector. We're focused on two big goals. One is the community engagement and connectedness, and the other is energy production, consumption, distribution, and storage. And with all of that, one of the guiding values, of course, is equity in the community, that we try to ensure that everybody can have access to the technology. We run educationally focused community events throughout the year, about every 2 months. We've been doing that since 2017. We also run community bulk buys of solar panels and batteries and solar hot water, particularly heat pumps and evacuated tubes, and we've got it. They're running at the moment. One with Yarra Ranges Council for solar panels and batteries, and another with Reclaim Energy for heat pumps. So if any of you are interested in that after this meeting today, get in touch with us. We have trained some home energy efficiency advisors just recently, And after the COVID-19 lockdowns, we hope to get into homes within the community area from people who invite us in to provide advice from our community volunteers on what you might be able to do in your own home. And we've got a great little thermal camera that we purchased as well, that we can go around the home and look at all the parts of your home where the energy is escaped, where the heat is escaping and the cold, the hot air can come in summer, and that'll give you a good idea of where you need to do some work on your home. This year we also focused on, in addition to all the other things that we're running, we focused on administration. We feel that it's really strong to have really important to have a strong administrative background for our organisation. And one of our members has got a community grant to write 40 policies for the organisation. But it's not just for us. We want to make these available for other community groups throughout Australia as well, to extend the service to the community. And the other really important project that we're involved in, is just finished, funded by Sustainability Victoria, was about getting an integrated administration system online for community energy groups, because everybody has problems with administration. You can imagine all the community volunteers coming together all with their own computers. No centralized system, and all the information gets dispersed and so on. So what we've done is work towards trying to centralize all of that so that we've actually got an organization, not lots of individuals doing their own thing. And we hope to make that available to other community energy groups and other voluntary groups throughout Australia. We do get grants from the Yarra Ranges Council, as I mentioned, the Victorian Government, Commonwealth Government, and FRRR, Foundation for Regional and Rural Recovery. And we get donations from our local community, including the Healesville Community Bank, the local RSL, and other community groups who support us, and individuals as well. So it's a tough gig trying to get the money to run a voluntary organisation, as you know, and also trying to get volunteers. So if any of you are interested in providing a few dollars for us, there is a place on our website to be able to make a donation. We'd gratefully receive that. Also, if you'd like to get more information about how you could get involved with Healesville Core and help out to transition the town to net zero, we'd love to hear from you. The issue that we're dealing with today, energy efficiency in the home, is really close to all of us. And we live in an environment where, in Australia, where we've not really paid historically much attention to insulating our homes and having a nice, warm, snug environment. So today we're going to hear from both of our speakers around what the problems are in regards to that. One of the main problems, of course, is paying for our gas and electricity to heat our home, just to have it all leaking out into the environment. So we're heating the atmosphere and paying for the privilege of doing that with huge electricity and gas bills. So what we want to do in our webinar today, is to talk about how we might be able to save some money by making our houses a bit snugger. I won't say any more at this point, apart from just wanting to welcome the people who have been coming in late to the meeting. Thank you all very much for attending. I would now like to introduce to you Alan Pears, who's our keynote speaker today. In the 1980s, Alan worked on the Home Energy Advisory Service, star rating appliance energy labels and mandatory home insulation regulations, while with the Victorian Government's Energy Information Centre. He's been an environmental consultant since 1991, involved in energy and environmental rating and regulation of buildings, green building developments, and efficient appliance development. Alan's adjunct professor at RMIT University and writes a regular column for Renew magazine. In particular, Alan was made a member of the Order of Australia in 2009 for his academic and community work in the field. Alan says of himself, "I've worked in the clean energy sector, particularly energy efficiency, since the 1970s, and on climate policy and programs since the late 1980s, across all sectors of the economy and with business, governments, and community groups. I've been involved in program and policy development, site-specific projects, education, and media commentary. Recent work has included reports with the Australian Alliance for Energy Productivity, Beyond Zero Emissions, local government, and lots of other interesting things." And he's now a fellow at the University of Melbourne Climate and Energy College. Without any further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Alan, who, with all of that background and experience, is going to present us with a very interesting seminar today. Thank you very much, Alan.
Right, I'll just, where am I? That. Share. Right. Okay, I'll go there. Right. Okay, well, thank you for the introduction, Jeff. It's always interesting to hear what people say about you when they introduce you. Yes, so what I wanted to do today was cover a bit of the context that we're all working in, and then look at the kinds of strategies that are available to future-proof our homes. The very big context at a global level is represented by the International Energy Agency's energy-related scenarios, in particular the Paris compliant scenario called the Sustainable Development scenario. And you can see that they think the least cost strategy to get to that globally will be dominated by two things. First of all, energy efficiency, the biggest one, and second, renewable energy. Sorry about that. So from that point of view, in Australia, it's a bit sad because while renewables is a really good thing to do, we have not focused on the energy efficiency dimension, which is the most cost-effective and fundamentally transformative component of our energy-related strategy. To look more at Australia and the energy picture, if we look at electricity, we are making a lot of progress there, and this is the Australian Energy Market Operator's first or latest integrated system plan, which shows how, depending on exactly what strategies we do, we are certainly already reducing our carbon emissions from electricity, and if we adopt the step change strategy, we are looking at very impressive reductions in emissions. And of course, a lot of households are already doing their own thing by installing rooftop solar. So that's a fairly positive story, although there's a lot of confusion in the marketplace and mixed messaging, which has to be sorted out, as well as a lot of practical problems I'll touch on a bit later. The story with gas is pretty different from that. Gas is, of course, a fossil fuel, and I think lots of people have always compared gas to conventional electricity, but now electricity is being transformed. We really do need to look much more closely at our gas issues. And the reality is the impacts of the gas industry are tending to increase as they shift towards coal seam gas, which involves many wells, and also new gas fields which have got more carbon dioxide mixed in with the methane gas. And the leakage of methane into the atmosphere is becoming a very hot topic, not just in Australia, but globally. And the IEA, the International Energy Agency, has put particular emphasis on the importance of cutting methane leakage. And the reason for that is because methane is a very active greenhouse gas. And even if we look at the 100-year impact, which is how the carbon accounting is normally done, its impact is 25 times that of the same amount of carbon dioxide. But in the short term, methane's impacts are 3 times higher than that. So if we're concerned about short-term warming, which could take us over tipping points, there is an important issue here for us to deal with. One of the other problems too is that the gas industry seems to be suggesting that the way they will transition to a green hydrogen future is by producing hydrogen from fossil gas. That actually increases greenhouse gas emissions even more in the short term. So it's kind of a bit weird, really. So until, you know, decades into the future, we've got carbon capture and storage, biogas in high volume production and renewable hydrogen, fossil gas does not look like a great story for us. Now, looking at where things are heading with electricity, since 2010, the left-hand graph has shown how, in fact, forecasts of future electricity demand have declined very dramatically from where they were. And that's related to a whole lot of factors, including improving energy efficiency. But in recent years, the forecasts have kind of stabilised at basically staying flat, as you can see there. And this is really partly because efforts to improve energy efficiency have been slowing. And in fact, this is not just an Australian problem, it is a global problem that energy efficiency improvement has been dropping behind what's needed. So we really need to focus a lot more there. Now, looking to the future, the right-hand graph shows out to 2038, 39, and it shows the energy market operators' estimates of future demand for electricity. And I think what's interesting here is that there is an enormous range between their lowest estimate and their largest one, pretty much chalk and cheese. And in this context, I find it quite interesting that there's very little discussion within the energy investment sector about this massive uncertainty, because, to be blunt, if you look back to the previous graph on the left here, you can see that if you had built a gas or coal power station in 2010 based on the forecasts of that time, you would not have made any money. You would have in fact gone broke because the demand's just not there. So this is a really big risk for the supply side, is just this uncertainty. And to be honest, Australia has very poor modelling of the likely range of real electricity demand, nor do we have very good focus on policies and strategies and what their implications would be. Now, lots of people talk about energy prices, and I think a lot of people are very confused about it all. And one of the reasons for that confusion is that a lot of the writing about energy prices actually relates to just one part of energy prices, which is the wholesale price. And the wholesale price, as you can see in the big bar there, is actually a relatively small part of the total retail price that we pay for our energy. So yes, wholesale charge prices can go all over the place, but the reality is network charges, which is the charges to get the electricity from the power stations to us through the power lines, are the biggest single contributor to our energy bills. And the retailer charges are really the retailer operating costs and the profits, which you can see in the smaller bar there. Retailers don't actually own any assets. They are just brokers. They are buying energy from the energy system, paying the network operators for the use of the power lines, and then adding a margin and charging us bills. So that's their job. And they have been making very big profits, and only in the recent few years in Victoria has the government started to really put some pressure on them. So that's kind of the main picture there. But the other element of the cost, as it's always presented by the Australian Energy Markets Commission and by the ACCC, is this extra bit at the top called environmental charges. And I get quite grouchy about this because, in fact, when you look at the real data, what you see is that these are not a cost. We have come out ahead through these environmental programs, and we come out ahead in some interesting ways. First of all, because this reduces demand for traditional energy sources, they depress the wholesale prices and the network charges. And that's a benefit for the whole of society, not just the people who invest in energy efficiency and renewables. And of course, if you replace your inefficient appliances and lights and things like that, or if you improve your factory's performance, you are saving money on energy, or you're buying cheaper renewables and your business is more profitable. What's also happening is that the people who take up the incentives to pursue these programs are actually increasing economies of scale and developing more mature supply chains, so that, again, everyone else in our society is able to access energy efficiency and renewables more cheaply. So this is a really annoying aspect of how a lot of policymakers look at the world. Just as a side issue, a lot of the large plants, say like aluminium smelters, don't pay all of these charges. They connect directly into the wholesale market, so they don't pay a lot of this. The other thing that's important is that when we look at network charges, which are, as I say, the largest part of the bill, the other aspect of this is that over 90% of blackouts are due to network problems. And of course, if your electricity goes out, what you'll find is that many of your gas appliances don't work either, because they need an electric fan or electricity to start them and things like that. So we need to focus much more on thinking about this local network problem. And I think it's where really starting to look at on-site and local neighbourhood energy storage and smart management and reducing our demand will be really increasingly important into the future, particularly in areas where there's fire risk and things like that. Now, this graph looks terribly difficult, so welcome to the new world of energy. I thought it was useful to use a couple of graphs from South Australia to just show you the complexity of our emerging electricity system and the roles that various things can play. So this is real data from South Australia in winter, on a windy winter day. So you can see enormous amounts of wind energy, not much solar from the rooftop stuff. And what you see is that in the middle of the day, they've got excess electricity, which they can usually export to Victoria. But you can also see that demand in the middle of the night, when there's not much solar, is quite high, largely driven by off-peak hot water, and also that there's a very large afternoon evening peak. And so the traditional coal-fired power stations and gas power stations and hydro are the ones that have to provide what they call the scheduled load. And you can see that on a windy winter day, they have to deal with a lot of variability, and coal-fired power stations in particular are not made to do this. And this is one reason why the coal-fired power stations are becoming technically pushed to their limits, and also struggling to make money because their revenue streams in the middle of the day, which used to be quite good, are now being torn apart by the renewables. This second slide shows us a low load, high solar day. So this is spring and autumn, when people are using much less electricity than in the middle of winter. And this is a day when there's lots of solar on the rooftop and some solar farms are running. Again, in this case, they're called thermal generators. You can see they have to still cope with enormous variation in demand for their electricity. They have a real problem. And at the same time, we see now it's worth looking at what are the sorts of things we can do. So, for example, we can look at our off-peak electric hot water, and first of all, we can make it much more efficient by investing in a heat pump hot water service, such as the ones that Core are promoting. And then if you buy the right heat pump, and the Reclaim one they sell is one of them, they have flexible controls so that you can shift their consumption to the times when energy is cheapest, or when your rooftop solar system's producing most electricity or whatever. So that's demand management. Also, we can do a lot to reduce that evening peak with LED lighting in winter, clearly, with reverse cycle air conditioners, with much better buildings, and with high efficiency appliances. All of these techniques are really much underused at the moment because basically policymakers have just not driven them very hard. Now, the graph here just shows a day in April, and it just shows you how the demand varies a lot, and also shows you how the price varies a lot. And again, this is the wholesale price, and the reality is we ordinary consumers don't see this because our retailers smooth out the costs for us. The excess solar that is now emerging in the market is driving down the price in the middle of the day, which used to be around the time of the peak demand and the high prices. So this is changing the whole cost structure of the system. And the reality of it is that what some people are calling the excess solar production around the middle of the day is now driving down the wholesale prices at those times. And it can add to network charges because networks were not designed to run backwards and handle these kinds of things. And so one of the things PV owners are going to have to recognise is that feed-in prices are probably going to go down. So if we have rooftop solar, we should be thinking about managing our demand at times other than the middle of the day to reduce the demand for fossil fuel electricity from the grid, shifting our demand away from those times into sunny daytime periods, like, for instance, using a heat pump water heater, as I said, thinking about what's called demand response, where when there are spikes in demand or changes in price, we can switch on and off equipment to take advantage of the situation, and that's being offered as a service. And then, of course, energy storage. And while we often think of energy storage as batteries, and they're the major one, we can store energy as heat, such as in a tank of hot water. And we can even store energy in things like cooked food. If you cook in bulk and then freeze the food and then defrost it in your fridge and then just microwave it on the day when the demand problems are there, that's actually a form of storing energy. So it gets quite interesting when you explore those things. Now, with regard to gas, the fossil gas demand and supply situation in Victoria is actually a bit worrying. And this is provoking a lot of pressure on the Victorian government to allow more gas exploration and to get it to approve liquefied natural gas ships to come in and bring gas for us. Now, what's going on here is if we look at the left-hand graph, we see that demand in winter, the red and blue bars, is much higher in summer. And on the coldest days, the dotted lines show that it's much higher again. And what this tells us is that most of our peak demand problem in gas is in winter, and it is directly related to gas used for heating buildings. So what we do about our buildings and switching from gas to other solutions is going to be very important in managing not just total gas demand, but in fact the problems of supplying that gas in the middle of the winter. And the right-hand side just shows you, the red dots show you the demand for gas in Victoria, and the bars show you the local supply within Victoria. Now, the thing is, we have historically been a very generous exporter of gas to New South Wales and even to the liquefied natural gas plants now in Queensland. But over the next few years, local production is in decline, and we will be just struggling to meet our own requirements on average. What that means is that in winter, we will have a shortage of gas if we don't do something to reduce the gas consumption in winter. And this is why these LNG tankers and things like that are all being talked about. Now, let's move on to some personal stuff. It's taken a while to get through the overall context, but I think it's useful to set the scene and to get you thinking about, well, what are the sorts of forces that are going to be applied to me when I'm thinking about my energy use in the future? Okay, so I'm very keen on the idea of roughly mapping out a personal strategy, because one of the things is that single decisions that we make, like what appliance we buy, how we renovate our house, how we cope if our hot water service collapses, all sorts of things like that, lock us in to long-term future emissions. So it's important to plan ahead. And so it's important to ask yourself questions like, how old is my hot water service? Is it likely to fail sometime soon? And if it does fail, what will I do? They're the kinds of things that this planning ahead can allow us to do. And again, what it also helps us to do is to realise, okay, first of all, we minimise our energy use and our emissions. Second, we buy zero emission energy, or we produce it ourselves with rooftop solar or whatever. But then the reality is that very few of us are in a position to be zero emission as of now, but in terms of our own actions. But we can become zero net emission by buying carbon offsets. And I think carbon offsets have an unfortunately bad name as a way of sort of buying yourself out of guilt and things like that. But we need to keep in mind that buying carbon offsets will mean that over time, first of all, we are helping to fund land replanting, Indigenous programs, local community programs in developing countries, and a lot of positive things, as well as over time, as all of the emission targets get tighter, the carbon offset price will go up anyway, which will mean there will be a natural force driving all of us who are looking at the cost of carbon offsets as, if you like, our default carbon price, will all feel more and more pressure to go renewable or to drive efficiency. These are just a few links to some of the things that will help you to calculate your emissions and to think about what you might do. And of course, ABC are about to start a program called Fight for Planet A, which is going to look at quite a lot of these issues. Okay, what do we use energy for? Well, lots of things. But what's interesting to me in the context of this graph is that it depends how you look at things, which activities that use energy are important. So, for example, if we're only looking at electricity, we can see that major electric appliances are over half of our electricity use. And the pie chart there shows that of those things, refrigeration and TV and IT equipment are really big. There's lots of bits and pieces with standby power and things like that. What is kind of masked here is the pool pumps and apartment common areas, which don't look that big. But when you think that only about 10% of people have got pools, if you have a pool pump is big. If you live in an apartment common area use, particularly in high-rise apartments, can be really big. So this is the whole thing, is that how you look at these indicators is a key issue. If you look at final energy, which is the energy that's metered, we see heating and cooling is a really big thing. The big yellow bit, hot water is big, and all of the electrical appliances are played down. If we look at summer peak electricity, we see that the cooling is enormous as an issue, but appliances are also pretty big. If we look at the cost, we see that the green bit there, the fixed charges, can be quite large. I mean, we pay over $1 a day to be connected to electricity, and if we're connected to gas, we're paying another $1 a day to do that. Then, of course, there's a greenhouse gas breakdown, and at the moment still, even though electricity intensity emission is going down, it's still quite big. This just highlights what the detail of what's going on at the time of summer and winter peaks in electricity demand. And I'm conscious that I'm running a bit short of time, so I won't go into them in detail, but you can see in summer, cooling is a really big thing. And even in Victoria, with all the gas heating, electric heating in winter is a big thing. And if we're going to shift away from gas to reverse cycle air conditioners, which in many ways is a good thing to do, if we don't upgrade our buildings and if we don't replace the existing resistive electric heating with much more efficient heat pumps, then winter heating could become a big issue for us with our electricity system. There's a helpful program around which can help inform us in making our choices about appliances, and I'm sure that you're all familiar with the traditional appliance energy label, which has been with us since the mid to late 80s. What most people don't realise is that a 4 or 5 star appliance may not be a very efficient one. For example, the most efficient clothes dryers are 10 stars. The most efficient televisions are 8 stars. But the only way you can tell this is if you see the new additional label, where they are now allowed to add what they call a coronet of extra stars once they get more than 6 stars. So the problem we have is if you go into a shop, most of the products will still have the old label and it'll look as though, oh, it's a 5-star TV, it looks fantastic. Round the back, you might find one that's 8 stars. But the ones that don't make 8 stars don't have to show that they've got none of those extra stars.
So we'll come back to Alan later just for the tail end of his talk, and we will transition now over to Glenn. But I think if we just take a moment to reflect on what Alan is talking about, he's really saying in the context of our own homes and the energy consumption, that we really need to take into account the big picture of what's happening with energy right around Australia to give us some deeper insights into how we fit into that big picture. The things that we're interested in our houses are what Glenn is going to talk about now. Glenn is a man who's a fount of knowledge and information about energy efficiency in the home. He works at the Enviro shop in Northcote and with the Darebin Council, and anything to do with renewable energy and energy efficiency, I think Glenn has a response to. The Enviro shop has a great website with lots of useful products, and he's Glenn knows all about those particular products. Unfortunately, he can't do this year what he did previously, and that was bring the products into the actual talk so that we could see them, he could demonstrate them. But they do have a notice on the website at the moment that they're currently giving away for free their 34-page booklet on home energy efficiency. So if any of you would like to get that booklet, then I would suggest that you get onto the website and see what you can do about getting a free copy of it. Without further ado, I'd like to hand you over to Glenn, and he will talk to you about the details of what you can do in your homes in order to create lower energy bills and to be living in snugger buildings. Thanks very much, Glenn.
Thanks, Jeff. I'll just get my presentation up. Yep. All right. Okay, so that should be up. Oh, which one is it sharing? So it's not actually giving me a view of what's up there. Hopefully that's all correct. Anyway, welcome everyone. Hope you're all staying safe and well and warm in these sort of interesting times. As Jeff was saying, I've been working at the Enviro Shop for about 15 years now, and I've done pretty much everything there over the years. Yeah, should be able to answer any questions you may have, even just today, or we can just send emails into the shop. We've had to sort of shut down the retail store at the moment with this stage 4 lockdown, but we're still on the emails. I've been working from home for quite some time. So yeah, feel free just to ask us about anything. I should have an answer for most things. So moving on, the kind of questions that we get at the shop most often is, how can I make my home more comfortable? That's always the big one. That's very primal kind of thing. If you're cold or if you're too hot in the summer, then not great. Increasingly mainstream audience asking, how can I reduce my impact on the environment? That used to be quite a small percentage of the population, but it's becoming more and more common. How can I save money? That's very common, of course, and particularly with everyone, or a lot of people, not everyone, but being forced to work from home now that you're now paying your electricity bills and heating bills and that during the day, whereas previously your employer was doing that. So a lot of people's home costs have gone up. So that leads to, how do I work out what to do about it? And where do I start? Most people are quite overwhelmed. There's a lot of information out there. How do you work out what actually applies to you? And how do you put them in some kind of sensible order of, where do I start? What's going to make the biggest difference? What's actually going to solve my specific problems? So the answer to that is to actually need to identify and control the energy flows in and out of your home. As Alan was saying, that you're pumping all of this heat into your house in the middle of winter. A good percentage of it is just flowing straight back out again and heating the area around you. But it's not just, heating electricity. There's a lot of energy streams coming into your house and then leaving your house. So the important thing is, how do you identify the ones in your particular home and where are they coming from and where's all energy going to? So it's really important the first thing to do before you actually take any action is sit down, think about it, do some research, do some investigation around your home and really identify what are the energy flows into your home and what are the energy flows going out of your home. Which ones do you think you have under control and which ones do you need to get under control is really what it's all about. And anyone can do that with a little bit of help and knowledge. It's just breaking it down into smaller problems. So the two main flows of it, energy flows into and out of your home, looking at passive energy flows, which is like the infrastructure of the house, which is, draft proofing, insulation, your windows, all of that sort of passive energy coming in and out of it. So sun coming in, heat escaping, there's lots of passive energy flows in and out of the average home, particularly in Australia. There's glorified tents, as someone called them. And the active energy flows are the actual connections that we've got that we're generally being billed on. So your electricity, your gas, your water. But that also includes products, things that you buy and your waste that is leaving the house. There's a lot of embodied energy in everything that you buy and everything that you bring into your home is energy coming into your home, and all of the waste that is leaving your home, whether that's wastewater, sewage, garbage, food scraps, anything that is leaving your home is also embodied energy. So that needs to be included in your energy flows in and out of your home. So it's really important to sit down and look at your house as this sort of box with things coming in and things leaving. Really break it down, really get a grip on what's happening in your home. So working through them in a rough kind of order, some of the biggest difference you can make is passive solar design. So fundamentally, in our climate, it's about trying to get the sun into your house in winter to help warm it, and trying to keep the sun out in summer. And typically more so keeping the sun out in summer is a bigger issue here, because you can get a lot of energy coming into the house if you've got direct sun coming through a window in the Australian summer. There's a lot of energy involved. So external shading, stop it before it hits a window. You can see there's actually one of my lovely blinds up the top there and some of my neighbours' roller shutters. You've got to improvise when you're working from home with your images. But those kinds of things are the most effective passive solar control in the Australian summer. So you can see an unprotected window, the sun comes in, strikes the interior, gets absorbed, gets turned into heat, heats up the room. With interior blinds, you think, oh, okay, it's hot, I'll just pull down the blinds. The sun's now striking the blinds absorb the heat, and the heat's still in the room. So it reduces the glare, but it actually doesn't reduce the heat load very much in the room. External blinds, that's what you really need. The blinds will get hot, but there's hopefully some ventilation behind them for the air to escape, and you really, cutting down on that sunlight and energy that's coming into the room. If you cannot put external blinds on, rental home, upstairs, various other issues like that, there's a really good product called Wren Shade. We sell it through the shop. It's kind of a perforated foil covered paper, and it comes on a long roll, and you can get it made up into blinds. You can attach it to the windows with sort of Velcro spots. There's lots of things you can do to get it in the right place. And will reflect about 80% of the sunlight straight back out again, while still allowing some light into the room and allowing you to see out. So you can see on there, you can still see out quite effectively, but that's massively reduced the heat load through that window for that room there. And also if you have like a pergola or something with a laser light roof, as you can see on the photo on the right there, very effective underneath laser light for reflecting some of that radiant heat back in summer. They can get incredibly hot under those sort of laser light type pergolas in summer. So a very, very effective product and very cost effective to control sunlight in the summer. The next most important thing after your passive solar design is draft proofing, controlling the airflow in and out of your home. The most effective way of moving heat around is basically with air, which we use to our advantage with, ducted heating systems, ducted cooling systems, things like that. But if you have gaps and drafts in your home, all of that warm air in winter is basically just disappearing out. And in summer, you're getting hot air coming in or your cool air disappearing, whichever way you want to look at it. So identifying all of the sources of drafts in your home and controlling them is very, very important. That is by far the biggest return on investment you will typically get in the average home in Australia is draft proof and control. The materials themselves are quite cheap. You can DIY most of it very easily, even if you're not particularly handy. And the difference it will make to the energy efficiency and the comfort of your home is massive. Even if the air is fairly warm, if you've got moving air, you'll feel cool. You can use that to your advantage in summer with, fans and things, but in winter, even if the air is at a reasonable temperature, if it's moving, it's cooling you and you feel cold. So draft proofing is very, very effective. Great way of spotting around sort of door frames and window frames, looking for evidence of drafts. If you see those little lines of dust, like in that photo, that means you've got a draft coming through there. As the air slows down, as it's kind of moving through the gap, it'll leave a little line of dust. So anywhere on doors and window frames that you can see that, you've got a draft issue and it needs to be addressed. Another good way of spotting them is you can get some source of light smoke. Stick of incense is a cheap and easy way of doing it. There are sort of professional type ones where they have a, I think it's glycerine or something. It's basically like the e-vaping cigarette things, but without all the additives and that, that sort of generates a light smoke. Perhaps it might be worth, Core investing in one of those that they can loan out and use as well. But yeah, if you've got a source of light smoke and you see it moving, you've got air movement happening, and that it's either coming from or going to a gap somewhere where you've got a draft. So you can use that to sort of pick the direction of where the air movement is and trace it to its source and go, okay, there's something I need to deal with. Bottoms of doors is one of the biggest ones. There's often huge gaps underneath the front and back door. Raven draft sealing products Raven's an Australian company. They make a great range of products. They're very widely available. We stock some of them at the shop. They're also widely available, hardware stores, various other places online and things. Highly recommend. That's one of my favorite ones. I think that's the RP6. Mental blank on which one that actually is, but it's kind of a spring-loaded flap. So when you open the door, it lifts up and out of the way. And when you close it, that little cam on the right pushes it down and gives you a really good seal on the door. So that's one of my favorite ones for sealing gaps on doors. Some of the other major ones to look at. If you have an evaporative cooling system, great in summer, absolute nightmare for energy efficiency in winter. All of that air that you've paid to heat is rising up to ceiling level, disappearing through those ducts and off into the atmosphere. You pretty much cannot effectively heat your home if you have evaporative cooling ducts in the roof in winter. Closing the little veins on them is one step, but it's still not airtight and it's still no insulation value to it. One of the best solutions I've seen around is a company called Heat Saver. And they make a range of sort of custom molded fittings, and they basically attach with some magnetic tape. Very quick and easy to sort of pop on at the end of summer and then pull off at the end of winter, and they seal them very effectively. So if you've got evaporative vents, I can highly recommend them. Downlights, apart from the energy inefficiency of the halogens and other such issues, they are a major source of drafts. And again, because they're in the ceiling, all of that warm air is rising up in winter and disappearing into your roof cavity. And in summer, when it's getting incredibly hot in your roof cavity, you've got this very hot air coming down straight through them, and particularly those gimbaled ones like the image there. Absolute nightmare. And then a lot of them that have been replaced with LED bulbs, a lot of the LED bulbs have ventilation through them as well. So you've got a huge amount of airflow coming back and forth through that light fitting. Absolute nightmare for energy efficiency. So the best answer is a dedicated LED fitting like that one on the right, fully sealed against airflow, rated to be, that particular one's actually a Lumi, which is rated to be covered with insulation. But a lot of them you can actually insulate up to the sides of them as well, because the other issue with downlights, you've got huge gaps in the insulation for safety. So if you get your thermal camera out and have a look at some places with downlights, you'll see some fascinating imagery from that about just how little of your roof is actually effectively insulated if you've got downlights. A great one for around doors. The part of the problem with a lot of doors and windows and the sort of the foam draft stripping, it's often not an even gap, and often it'll make the door difficult to close. If the door's a little bit warped, it's not going to effectively seal. They can be a bit of a nightmare. There's not many doors where they actually give a good seal all year round and don't cause issues. And this company called EcoMaster, who does a lot of great things, has come up with a really, really good solution for that. It's the draft dodgers. You can see it goes around the outside of the door frame. There's some better pictures on our website and on their website. It's kind of a molded timber strip that sticks onto the outside of the frame with some industrial double-sided tape and holds that little sort of foam strip securely against the door. It gives a really good, really effective seal. If there's a bit of movement with the seasons and things, it adapts to it, and it doesn't make the door any harder to close. So So very, very effective seal around doors. Highly recommend them. They do another version, the same sort of timber molding, but it has like a brush strip instead of that foam one, so things can slide against it. So very effective if you've got sliding doors, or if you've got double hung windows, or things like that where the opening is sliding against it rather than sort of, you know, closing against it. The main issue with these is they come in a pack that is about 2.5 meters long. They are a nightmare to ship. They're a nightmare even, you know, if people picking them up from the shop who live locally, even just carrying them home, if they're just walking distance, they're kind of fun to carry. 2.5 meter long flexible bit of timber. But I've been speaking to EcoMaster about it, and we've had some discussions here and there about whether they could do like a 1 meter long lengths, you know, shippable version, and they're thinking about that. But they're very generously offered to do a bulk buy kind of situation for Healesville residents. If you have a group of people who are interested in getting these, we can organise some discounts on the pricing and get them all delivered by their delivery driver. So for one fixed charge for everyone, instead of everyone paying individual courier costs, which would be a nightmare, they can have their delivery driver come up and basically do drop-offs to all the addresses around town in Healesville in one day for one delivery charge. So I'd highly recommend, if you've got a few people interested in those, get a bulk buy together, let us know what you need. We can let you know about the different options and things, and we can organise for a one-off delivery day to everyone up that way. It would work out much more cost-effective for everyone and much less hassle for, you know, couriers and all of that kind of thing. So I'll leave that up to you to discuss sort of after the presentation, and get in touch with me if you'd like to organise that. Draft proofing, particularly in older houses and rental houses. I'm in a rental house, and this is actually an old air conditioner in the wall in the lounge room, which doesn't work very well. We don't use it, but it's massive amounts of airflow through it. And during the bushfires, we had massive amounts of smoke coming through it. If I owned the house, I'd probably pull it out and put a lovely double glazed window in there or something. But I don't own the house, so I had to improvise quickly to try and seal it up in a way that wasn't going to, you know, non-permanent, non-damaging, minimal cost kind of solution. So don't be afraid, particularly for, you know, short term, even if while you're working out the best way of doing it, or you're getting the budget sorted, all of that. You can improvise with tape and bubble wrap and all kinds of things to, you know, stuff newspapers in gaps. You know, don't be afraid to improvise to get things solved quickly and effectively while you're actually working out a better way of doing it. You know, it really, you do have to be a bit creative with draft proofing sometimes. So after you've got your draft proofing under control, then insulation is the next most important. Sealing insulation being the most important. Making sure that that is adequate, effective, and well laid, so that there's no gaps in there. Then your windows are usually the next biggest gap in the insulation in the envelope of your house. So single glazed windows, as you can see on the left there. You'll get a cold pocket of air which will form against the glass because the glass is very thermally conductive. Warm air rises, cold air sinks. It will drop down to floor level. It will draw in warm air from above. You get a circulation pattern happening against the window, which is very, very effective at cooling down the room very rapidly. It's a very efficient way of losing heat from that room by having an unprotected single glazed window. At night, you can have good, thick, heavy curtains that seal well against the wall and the floor, and you have a pelmet over the top. There's one of the daggy pelmets at my house. And that will trap that cold air against the window very effectively and help insulate it. It's a bit more of an issue during the day if you want to open up the windows, get some daylight in, but it's still cold outside. That's a bit more of an issue, and that's where double glazing is very effective. It's still giving the same kind of effect by having two layers of glass close together. It's trapping that air in there so it can't circulate, and add some good insulation value to the window. It's still not as well insulated as a wall, even an uninsulated wall. So you should still have the curtains and the pelmet and everything at night to help seal it off when it's colder outside. But double glazing will massively increase the energy efficiency of your home. But replacing the windows in your home is a very expensive exercise. There's some great retrofit double glazing companies out there. Still quite expensive. The cheap option is the duck window film. So it's a thin plastic layer with some double-sided tape. It works best with timber windows. They're about the right depth of the window frame. You should have about a 10 to 20 mil gap between the window and the film. Much more than that, and the air starts circulating again, and it loses the efficiency. So very cheap, very effective way of double glazing your windows, even if it's while you're saving up for a more expensive method, or if it's for rooms you aren't using as much. Great for rental houses, very easy to remove, very easy to apply yourself. Highly recommended solution basically for everyone. The one fly in the ointment with it is aluminium windows. You can see a small picture on the right there. The frames themselves are very thermally conductive, and they're actually not thick enough to provide effective insulation value. These films, basically you just can't apply them to that kind of window in any effective kind of manner. We have come up with a nice improvised solution. There's a link to it under the Windows section on our website. You can download a PDF. It was also turned into an article by Renew magazine based on our PDF, and you can find that online if you search Renew aluminium double glazing. I'll find a link and send that out later. Basically, you make up a frame out of fly screen framing. It's very cheap and effective to buy, kind of extruded aluminium tubes and corner brackets, and you make a frame that goes into the window reveal with some strip around the outside to seal it off airtight, and you apply the double glazing film onto that. So you can seal off the whole window reveal and double glaze it very effectively and very cheaply, and it's easy to pull it out when you want to open up the window on a nice day. So there is a good way of sort of improvising your own, and with aluminium windows, and quite a few people that I know have done it and said it works really well. Cutting down on condensation as well. The other issue with cold windows and winter is you get condensation happening, and that moisture can lead to mold and all kinds of other health issues related to that. So double glazing also helps a lot with condensation issues. Moving on to appliances, as Alan was saying, heat pumps are the answer to pretty much everything to do with heating and cooling and moving heat around. If you're not familiar with heat pumps, your fridge is a heat pump, split systems are heat pumps. There's very good heat pump hot water systems. There's quite a lot of heat pump technology out there already. It's just becoming more common as a mainstream kind of thing. So there's a compressor which compresses the refrigerant gas and it makes it hot. If you compress something, it gets hot. If you've ever noticed pumping up a bike tire, the pump will get hot. And so that creates a hot side, and you can run air or water or whatever over that and extract the heat from it. And then when it goes through an expander valve and that pressure drops, it gets cold. So if you've ever noticed, if you're using a spray can or something like that, it will get cold as you're reducing the pressure in it. So that creates a cold side, which you can then use to absorb heat. So that's what's happening in your fridge. The cold side is inside. It's absorbing heat from inside the fridge. It's pumping around and dumping it out into your kitchen. Same thing with that's a sand and hot water system. Basically the same heat pump as the Reclaim ones you're doing in your bulk buy. Very good systems. So it's got a hot side and a cold side. It's blowing the air across a very cold condenser, which extracts the heat out of the air, even down to sub-zero temperatures. And then that heat gets compressed and created into a hot side, which they run the water over. And then it moves that, that heated water then gets stored in the well-insulated tank there. So same principle, whether it's your fridge, a split system, heat pump, hot water. Very efficient, very effective way of moving heat around. You're not creating the heat. Electric resistive heating, you are burning the electricity to turn it into heat effectively. In this way, you're only using electricity to run that compressor, and they're typically 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times more efficient than a straight electric resistive system. Very good way of doing things, and there's lots of great quality heat pumps out there now. So keeping warm, split system, again, a good quality one, your Daikins, your Fujitsus, those kind of ones. Very efficient, very effective systems. Daikin makes the Nexura, which is a radiant panel system, which gives you that hydronic kind of radiant heat in winter while being a lot more efficient. But keeping warm actually starts with you. You know, don't expect to wander around your house in the middle of winter in shorts and t-shirt. That's just not common sense. So, you know, eating a good, healthy diet, sensible clothing. I've noticed, you know, people whose cameras I can see, you seem to be wearing jumpers, and I've seen a scarf and things like that. Wear common sense clothing around the home. Make sure you're getting adequate exercise. If you're sitting down working from home for hours on end, you will get cold. Get up and have a walk around, you know, at least once an hour or something like that. Get the blood circulating. Use common sense to keep yourself warm as well. That's actually your primary defense for keeping warm, is actually, you know, just common sense and using your body's own systems to keep yourself warm. Compression gloves can be great as well for keeping the circulation in your hands. Another very sensible option, these little heating mats. I think we've just got some into stock at the shop. I'm not sure if they're up on the website yet or not, but they will be in the next couple of days. Instead of heating up the whole room, particularly if it's an inefficient room, particularly if it's a rental house and there's nothing you can do about it, there's no insulation, you've got limited control over the drafts, it's going to be expensive to heat the room. Heat yourself instead. These little mats only use 90 watts. You have it underneath your feet. Keep your feet warm. You feel warm. The heat rises up from it just around you, so you're just locally heating yourself. Very sensible, very efficient way of keeping yourself warm, particularly if you're working from home. Have it under your mat in the evening if you're watching TV or whatever. Very, very sensible way of heating yourself instead of heating the room. So in summer, apart from, you know, all the same energy efficiency things, draft proofing, insulation, double glazing, all of those things apply. Make your house as efficient as you can. Same principle, instead of cooling the whole room, you can cool yourself. We've got the Close Comfort Cool Focus, is a very efficient portable air conditioner. It doesn't hook up to a window. The ones that hook up to a window and try and cool the room can be very inefficient. They can use huge amounts of energy. They're trying to cool the whole room. They can actually cause issues because they're blowing the hot air. Most of them only have a one-way pipe. They're extracting air from the room effectively and dumping the hot air out the window, which creates a low air pressure in the room, which will suck in hot air from elsewhere to replace it. So they can actually use hideous amounts of energy and not be very efficient, the sort of portable ones that hook up to a window. This one blows cool air in a very focused stream at you. It cools you. It does not cool the room. It blows the warm air out the back of it. In an uninsulated, drafty room, it makes zero difference to the overall temperature. I've got one of these. I can vouch for it. It does not make the room itself effectively any hotter. The room's going to be hot anyway. There's nothing you can do about it. You're in a cool zone in front of it. It's using a maximum of 300 watts and usually quite a bit less than that, just blowing chilled air at you. And it can do 2 or 3 people on a couch or something as well. I've used it like that myself as well. So very efficient way, again, of using just that localized spot cooling and heating concept. SolarWiz roof ventilation. You can get incredibly hot temperatures in your roof cavity in the summer. 60, 70 degrees is quite achievable in the Australian summer. And even with good insulation, that heat pressure on the insulation, that heat differential between the inside and the outside is still putting a big heat load onto the interior. So at least keeping it to outside temperatures will actually reduce that heat load quite a bit. Your passive whirlybird is great. Much more effective is an active solar one like the SolarWiz, where it's got a solar-powered extractor fan. It's moving 15 times more air through that roof cavity. keeping it at outside ambient temperatures, not letting the heat build up in there. Very good solution for summer. They have bushfire rated ones with sort of ember screens and things in them. And they're also good for controlling condensation and moisture and things over the winter as well. So again, another highly recommended option. Moving on quickly, just looking at waste management. One of the biggest factors for waste energy in terms of products is actually food waste. Very high greenhouse factor if it ends up in landfill. Your food scrap should not be going in the bin into landfill. They're actually a valuable resource for you to improve the soil and grow your own food on your own property. And by keeping your own property and by doing aerobic composting, it's much less damaging in terms of, you know, producing methane and greenhouse gases and things like that. So a traditional type compost bin needs about 50-50 sort of food waste and sort of dry garden waste, leaves and things like that. Very simple, very effective. Worm farms, great. Do require a bit of maintenance. You've got a few thousand pets you've got to look after, make sure they don't get too hot, too dry, too cold, but yeah, great, especially if you've got kids. Very handy one, particularly if you are in an apartment or don't have a lot of garden waste or anything like that, is the bokashi bin. It's actually a fermentation system. It's a sealed bin. I'll move on to the next slide where it actually explains a bit more about it. So you can see that you drop your food scraps in there, you sprinkle a bit of the bokashi mix in there, which has been fermented with a particular blend of microbes, and seal it all up, and it actually ferments. It basically pickles the food scraps while they're in there. You drain off the juice. It's very concentrated liquid fertilizer, which you dilute and use for fertilizing pot plants, or you can actually use as a drain cleaner. The microbes eat the gunge that builds up in the U-bend. Once the bin's full, you dig a hole somewhere and bury it, or you can drop it into your traditional compost bin, or it can go into your council green waste if they allow you to put food waste in your area. Because it's all been pre-digested, it breaks down very, very quickly into very nutritious, very biologically available compost. Veggies love it. Anything that likes a lot of nutrients, it makes it very viable. For them to, you know, get all the nutrients out of it, and because of all the microbe life in it, improves the soil quality and the soil life. So it's very good for rebuilding degraded soil. If you've got soil that's in poor condition, some bokashi through it is excellent. So that's really the main topics I was going to cover. As Jeff mentioned, we've got a lot of information up on our website at the moment. I've especially put up a lot of information on how to sort of audit your own home. A lot of the topics I've covered here goes in a lot more depth. There's a link straight from the front page, or if you go to the information tab on the menu on our website, there is a lot of in-depth information in specific areas on there that you can dig into. Feel free to get into there. And there's a lot of other great resources as well, like Your Home Technical Manual. There's, you know, Renew Magazine. There's great sources of information out there at the moment that is actually directly applicable to Australian conditions and Australian housing and our local climate. A lot of the information out there, people get confused with information from overseas that's really designed for snow zones and really doesn't apply to our climate and our building style and our building regulations. So try and get your content locally. There's lots of great local content available in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Glenn. Great to have all of that practical information for people. I'm always amazed at the range of products that are available to help us to proof our homes against the heat and the cold. We are at the time now for questions, and I understand that Alan is back. Alan, can you turn your microphone on and just let us know that you're still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thanks, Alan. Just before we go into questions, was there anything you wanted to add from the tail end of your presentation that you didn't have time to talk about when you were cut off?
Yeah, well, I think I pressed the wrong button, but I was actually going to the end slide anyway. So I think I covered everything I planned to, and Glenn's expanded nicely on some of the things like heat pumps and things like that. So I'm happy to let's go to questions and discussion.
Okay. One question there was earlier was from Michael Nardella. When you were talking, and that was about the issue of electric vehicles and what sort of impact that's going to have on the larger electrical supply system if we uptake electric vehicles much more than we are at the present time.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of aspects to it. Firstly, if you look at the Australian average car, it actually only runs about 35 kilometres a day. Now, if you've got a good electric car, that's actually only requiring about 4 or 5 kilowatt hours per day of electricity. To put that in context, the heat loss from a resistive electric hot water tank is about 2.5 kilowatt hours a day. So if you, for example, went from a resistive electric hot water tank and, you know, providing hot water to a heat pump, that would offset, on average, the power consumption of an electric car if you were charging it up. So it's an issue, but I think the big issue is really that the electric vehicle guys are putting more and more effort into supporting very rapid recharging of very large batteries, and that, if it's not well managed, can really put a lot of pressure on the electricity network just purely in the short term. On the other hand, all of those batteries, the next generation of electric vehicles are what's called vehicle to grid capable, and they will be able to feed power into the grid or to back up your home. And so they'll be able to help the grid productively. So I think, you know, look, the future of transport, once you get beyond short to medium trips, is definitely the electric vehicle. I think what a lot of people are calling electromobility, electric bikes, electric scooters, things like that, are actually an incredibly important part of the solution. I think particularly, you know, where people have got travel distance of less than, say, 5 kilometres, if you're, you know, going to the bus stop or the train, there's enormous potential for them. And I know people who've bought electric bikes and have been able to sell one of their 2 cars and things like that.
Okay, thanks very much, Alan. Very interesting. We have a question from Happy Sound, DNA, who said, we used Perspex glass, in inverted commas, which looks like glass. It's easy to fit and is less expensive than glass. Glenn, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, that was in the sort of the middle category that I briefly touched on, between replacing your windows and the duck film. There's companies like EcoMaster and Magnetite and a few others like that that do what they call retrofit double glazing, where they're using a sheet of Perspex and a custom-made framing system that sort of attaches to your existing window to give the double glazing from it. So quite a bit cheaper than replacing the entire window. In some cases, you can sort of DIY it, but you have to be quite handy and you have to be careful dealing with condensation issues and things like that. So that Perspex kind of option can be a very good option. It's just kind of in that in-between range between the very cheap duck film and the more expensive replacing your windows.
All right, thanks, Glenn. And comment here, awesome presentation from you, Glenn. Thanks for that. And Julian Higgs is asking, what about ceiling fans for both summer and winter air movement?
Yep, very sensible. Yeah, as I sort of hinted on as well, like air movement has a very effective cooling effect if you have air movement over your skin. So ceiling fans in summer means that you can basically open up the house, have some fresh air, but get some air movement over you with very little energy use, and uses your body's natural cooling systems, with perspiration to cool yourself. And in winter, you can reverse the direction, so it's moving the air up, and you have it on low, and all that warm air that's collected up near the ceiling gets stratification, where you'll get a layer of hot air up near the ceiling. A ceiling fan can help sort of push that back down and even up the temperature in the room. So yeah, that can be a very sensible idea and very energy efficient.
Good, thanks.
Sorry.
Yeah, Alan wants to add a comment.
Yeah. I think with ceiling fans, I agree with everything Glenn's saying. It's really worth your while to look up Choice Magazine's tests of ceiling fans. The most efficient ceiling fans today are 15 to 20 watts, compared with a lot of older ones which are over 100 watts. So if you're running them for long periods, there's a big difference. Also, a lot of the older ones actually have a kind of a switching thing that just dumps heat into the room instead of reducing the energy consumption of the fan. So again, the modern fan with a smart electronic control will actually save you more energy when you slow it down than if you're running it flat out. So again, this also applies to things like exhaust fans. I've seen exhaust fans as low as like 4 or 5 watts instead of 40 watts. So just even things like that around your home, we're seeing remarkable technology improvements that can help us.
Good, thanks, Alan. And the next question from someone called Unknown is saying, what concerns are there about indoor air pollution when we reduce drafts and hence reducing the air changes per hour?
Yeah, it is something to be very, very aware of and very careful of. Actually, getting off the gas will significantly improve your indoors air quality. Another bonus for going all electric. Condensation, because our houses are so poorly designed in terms of moisture management as well as airflow, condensation can be a major problem if you make your house more airtight. Partly the answer is, being aware of it, opening up your house on a nice day as much as you can, venting all of that sort of more saturated air out. We breathe out moisture all the time. Gas appliances are adding a lot of moisture to the air. Cooking, all of those kinds of things. You're adding significant amounts of water vapor into your home, and you do need to get it out, otherwise you'll get condensation on cold surfaces. A better long-term solution is things like the heat exchangers, where there's quite simple ones. It's basically a vent in the wall where it's bringing in outside air and venting out inside air, but they're kind of passing them over each other, so it's warming up the air. And the opposite in summer, it's, your cooled air inside, it's kind of trying to exchange the heat between the two, so you're getting fresh air in and stale air going out, while minimising the heat losses with that changeover. Very common in snow zones and places like that. If it's minus 40 outside, and your house is going to be sealed up for 6 months of the year, you definitely need things like that going on. But also can be very relevant to our climate as well.
Yes, Alan.
Yeah, if I can add, look, again, I agree with everything Glenn's saying. One of the issues that's been emerging as houses have become tighter is the older style gas flued heaters. And what has now been found to happen occasionally is that if you're running a range hood, you can actually suck the flue gases that normally would go out the chimney back into your house. And if your gas burner is not properly operating, then it can actually be a safety risk, which is why the safety people in the Victorian government have been running campaigns saying get your gas heater checked every couple of years, and they've been issuing alerts to people about some of the older style gas heaters to just get rid of them. So the public housing people, for example, are moving towards heat pump reverse cycle air conditioning, partly because of this safety concern. So it's just worth keeping a bit of an eye on there. And also, as Glenn said, if you are cooking and you're one of these people who wants to have, cook your pasta with no lid on, boiling enthusiastically, you're doing a great job of creating a condensation problem in your house.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Alan. And Michelle Zwageman says, what about wood fire stoves and using them also for hot water systems? Alan?
Well, again, there's tensions here with wood heating because in a lot of areas, for example, Canberra and Launceston and places like that, the air pollution from wood heating, even the fairly modern ones, certainly being an issue. And there are what are called pellet heaters, which are able to be much more controllable and can be much cleaner. But then you have to be able to buy the pellets for them to use them instead. So there's a general shift away from wood heating, I think, particularly. Again, the other thing is if you've got a really efficient home, you don't need very much heating. And so a lot of the wood heaters are grossly oversized, which means you'll be running them on a low burn, which is actually less efficient as well. So I think we've got some interesting challenges with wood heating. And yes, you can use them for a wet back, and that can work well with a solar hot water system where you get sun in summer, but in winter they don't work so well. Which comes back to the heat pump water heater too, which one of the advantages to me of a heat pump water heater over a solar one is that in winter it's nearly as efficient as it is the rest of the year. And in summer it doesn't overheat. And these can be practical issues for people. So that's worth looking at.
Yeah, thanks, Alan.
Can I just say,
yes, Glenn.
Yeah, can I say one more thing about wood heaters? They can actually make the rest of your house colder. Depending where there's that's combusting air and going up the chimney or the flue or whatever, that air has to be replaced with air from the house. So while all that hot air is going up the flue, it's going to be sucking air from the rest of the house through any gaps and drafts and things around the rest of the house from outside. So while it's nice and warm and toasty in front of the actual wood heater, all of the other rooms of your house are going to be getting colder. So not very effective as an actual house heating option in most cases, and quite inefficient, as well as those air pollution issues. As far as wet backs with hot water, I really only recommend that if you are standalone. As Alan was saying, very effective in conjunction with a solar hot water system for standalone things. If you're not standalone off grid, there's no reason to do that. You're really much better off having solar panels and a heat pump hot water system. Yeah.
Okay, thanks very much, Glenn. Martin Hames says, in brick veneer homes, should the external vents in brickwork be covered up to reduce the airflow through wall cavities?
No, never mess with the external vents, particularly on brick houses. Internal ones you can generally block up, but the external ones, it's more about ventilating the substructure of the house. If you do block them up, and this can be quite a severe issue in some houses where the gardeners end up being built up against the side of the house over the years and blocked up vents. There's no longer any ventilation under the house. You can end up with quite serious moisture issues under there, underfloor rot, mold issues, rising damp. It's a structural thing. The external vents, particularly in brick veneer houses. So very important. Keep them clear. Keep them well ventilated.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thanks, Glenn. It's just about time to finish, and I have let people know that both Glenn and Alan are willing to stay on for additional questions. But some people may want to leave at 12, so I'd like to bring the formal proceedings to a close and then continue with questions afterwards. So I'd like to thank Glenn and Alan very much for two very interesting presentations today. From the point of view of the people listening, I guess the big question for us is where we go after a session like this and what we do. Because it's one thing to get the information, it's another to translate that information into real action in the real world to bring about a real change in our homes. So I would encourage you to give serious thought to what you can do in economical ways to bring about a better sealing of your home with draft proofing and looking at insulation and things like the heat pump that from Reclaim Energy that Healesville Core has on offer at the moment. And also with the ceiling insulation and solar panels and so on. These are all ways in which you can invest in your home. And I use the word invest advisedly because what happens is that with the money that you're saving, you're actually paying back the cost of those things. And then after you've paid back the cost, it's all free after that. Like I paid for I put solar panels on my rooftop and got in evacuated tubes, and I paid for the system in about 7 years. And now I have very cheap energy bills, which I'm very grateful for. And they essentially paid for themselves within 7 years from the savings that I made. The other thing I'd like to mention to you, Alan touched on it before, is that the ABC program called, what do I got here, called Fight for Planet A on Tuesday night. With a very interesting program, again, on energy efficiency in the home. And I hope you'll tune in for that. There is a possibility that the Yarra Ranges Council might be running a webinar next weekend, and that will be a follow-on from that ABC program. And I've been asked if I would participate in that. So we'll let you know on our through our newsletter system what's actually happening in that regard. So you'll be able to tune in to that as well. So thank you all very much for attending today, and thank you, Alan and Glenn. And we'll bid farewell to those people who want to go now and move on to some further questions. So Louise Taylor has said lots of good info. Thanks for organising this. I plan on renovating my old farmhouse with hempcrete walls and possibly hempcrete in ceilings. Can I use Healesville panels under the existing hardwood floors, which could be a fire-resistant, cost-effective way of sealing the floors? Thank you. We'll start with you, Alan, and then perhaps move over to Glenn.
Oh, that's a tough detail one, isn't it? Clearly, she's got several agendas here, including reducing fire risk. I think it would depend a lot on the detail of the design of the building, whether putting things under the floors rather than around the edges of the floor would be a way to go. So I'd be more inclined to put it around to the edges than under the floor itself, and possibly insulate under the floor separately. But in terms of hempcrete, I've read about it and I've seen pictures of it, and I've heard people say it's a great thing, a great material to use. But I have to admit I'm not too hotshot on that one. Glenn, are you familiar with it?
No, I wouldn't say I'm really familiar with it. Again, I've just heard good things about it, structurally and environmentally. Healesville I'm more familiar with. It's like an aerated concrete product, has great insulation value. I'm not sure it will be appropriate as an underfloor retrofit. A bit hard to say without seeing some sort of drawings and details of what they had in mind. And it's really a job for an architect or designer or engineer or someone to really get into the nuts and bolts of it to work out whether it's appropriate there or not. But it's not something that would spring to mind for me for that kind of use.
Okay,
Not
thanks,
to say
Glenn.
it's not sensible. It may be a great idea, but you'd really want to investigate it in depth because it's not a typical use of it in that kind of situation.
All right, thanks, Glenn. And Elaine Furness, thanks so much for a really informative session. Elaine is from the 2030 Yay Community Energy. And Natalie Kunst, what about the efficiency of honeycomb blinds? Glenn, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, they're great. Very good. As long as they're well sealed against the window, they need to fit the opening of the window tightly so there isn't airflow behind them. But they have very good insulating value within the window covering itself. So you can either have, very thick curtains, or you can do the honeycomb blinds, are also very effective. Yeah, they've just got to be fitted very well to the window.
Okay.
One of the good things about the honeycomb ones is that you do fit them across the top to the window frame, so you at least block out that top, and as Glenn says, you then got to make sure the sides are well sealed. Some of them have a reflective inner coating and some don't, so the reflective inner coating certainly improves the performance of the pleated blind.
Thanks, Alan. And Candy Westney says, thank you very much for this excellent webinar. Thanks very much, Candy. Nice to have positive feedback. Stuart Lockhart, an interesting question. Heat pump, water pump storage, it's very expensive. How long do they last? Alan, would you like to comment on that?
Is Alan frozen again?
Yeah, looks like it.
Anyway, that's actually my specialist area at the Enviro shop, and I can answer that one.
Okay, good.
And it really depends on what you pay for. The cheap ones, not very long. There's some pretty ordinary units at the cheap end of the market. If you're at the top end of the market, like the Sandon and the Reclaim, you've got a 6-year warranty on the compressor, 15 on the tank is pretty typical. Expected operational lifetime would be around about 20 years. There's always going to be, some will fail earlier, some will last longer, but that's kind of your expected average lifetime on a good quality stainless steel tank, and a really good quality heat pump like that would be around about 20 years. And that's starting to actually be borne out in Japan, where that particular heat pump design has been on the market for about 20 years in Japan. And one of our installers, one of our plumbers, his wife is Japanese, and her mum's had one installed there about 20 years ago and has just had to replace it recently. So it is actually, seems to be happening. It does seem to actually be realistic to have sort of a 20-year lifetime on a good quality top-end heat pump.
Good, thanks, Glenn. And as Glenn said, the Reclaim Energy pump is right up there at the top of the market. They are more expensive than the cheaper ones, but you're going to get longevity from them. Candy Westney is talking about a positive step that they have taken. She said, we inherited a fairly new electric hot water system with the house we bought 4 years ago. We have retrofitted and added a 6.4 kilowatt photovoltaic system, so that's solar panels. Instead of exporting excess energy, we have had the hot water system set up so that we can charge when it is heating. The PV system usually covers its energy use. Any comment on that?
Yeah, so solar diverter type systems, I'm not sure if you actually installed an actual sort of active solar diverter that is responding to the amount of solar output, or if it was more just a passive time switch. There's two ways of doing it. Can be a very good way of using your solar energy to heat the hot water. It is cheaper than a good quality heat pump, and I will recommend it to some people if they've got very low hot water usage. A heat pump hot water system is a lot more efficient. The Sandon is about 5 times more efficient than electric storage system. So it's using 5 times, 1/5 of your solar energy. So you've got more of that solar energy to use for other things or export or whatever. So if you're using quite a bit of hot water, the paybacks are still there on going to a heat pump rather than a solar diverter. If you're not using much hot water, an 80% saving on not much is not much. You're not going to get the payback on a heat pump system. So those solar diverters can be the best option if you have very low hot water usage.
And I guess it also depends on how good your electric hot water system is as well, because it
Yes.
does help
Add some extra insulation to it. Make sure all of the pipes are very well insulated. One thing I didn't put in the presentation that I should have is the valve cozy. It's a little insulating thing that clips over the PTR valve on your hot water system, because that's connected straight through into the tank. It's a hole straight through the insulation. Go out to your hot water system, feel all of the various valves and things coming out of it. If they're hot, you're losing significant amounts of heat through them. Do what you can to insulate them. Electric hot water systems, you can basically build a shed around them and insulate the little shed. That will reduce losses a lot. Gas systems, you've got to be a lot more careful with, because you've got all the gas, exhaust gases and things like that happening. They lose a lot of heat because of that sort of flue system. So increase the efficiency of your electric hot water system as much as you can if you are actually using that kind of diverter system.
Yeah.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, I'm back. My internet just vanished. Sorry about that. One of the things with the heat pump that I like actually is that effectively the heat pump reduces the heat losses from your hot water tank by its efficiency. So like as I mentioned earlier, a normal electric tank might lose 2.5, 3 kilowatt hours of heat a day, which is quite a lot. But if you've got a heat pump unit, then it's actually losing a quarter or a fifth of that in terms of the electricity you're using instead of a resistive electric heating element. And again, that's an advantage. But I agree with Glenn, we should insulate the tanks properly, which unfortunately we don't do.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Stuart Lockhart has said, are there self-closing vents which can be fitted to existing exhaust fans?
Yeah, that was another one I probably should have had in the presentation. There's a thing called a draft stopper, which is a sort of a round plastic molded thing with little flaps on the top. You can drop it straight over the top of an existing circular exhaust fan, and they sort of drop down and close it off. When you turn the fan on, the air pressure pushes them up and it works as normal. And when the fan turns off, they just drop down again. That seemed to be the star product of the first lockdown. I'm not sure why. We'd normally sold, half a dozen or a dozen per month. We sold, I think, about 150 of them just in March alone.
Wow.
For some reason, they just took off in the first lockdown. But yeah, very cheap, very effective way of sealing off exhaust fans that don't have those sort of flaps built in like the modern ones. You can get adapter plates for them for some of the 3-in-1 type systems and other odd shapes. You do have to be very careful with those 3-in-1 systems because of the heat lamps generating a lot of heat. And those things are a bit of a nightmare in a lot of ways, that there's a lot of ventilation through them to allow for that heat from the heat lamps. So yeah, in some cases it's basically just leave your bathroom door closed on the hottest and coldest days and let it do what it's going to do, because there's no way of controlling it if you've got one of those things.
Right, thanks very much, Glenn. Shane Gleeson, great presentations, Alan and Glenn, very informative and useful. Thank you. And Greg Wimp, many thanks, Alan, Glenn, and of course Core for putting this information session together. Much appreciated. Colin McKay, thanks for having me. Good presentations. Martin Hames, does the colour a house is painted make a significant difference to solar gain? Should we err on the side of lighter colours to reduce heat intake in summer?
It's probably more one for Alan, I'd say.
Okay. Particularly the roof, the answer is yes. The temperature of a tiled or even unpainted steel roof can hit, as Glenn mentioned, 70 degrees or so in summer, and that's radiating heat straight into your house. So basically, the lighter the colour, the less heat you're getting through in winter. Also, if you put a reflective foil under the roofing when you're installing it, that's also very effective and important as a strategy to reduce the heat load. There have been Melbourne Uni studies to show that a white roof or a heat reflective roof doesn't really make much difference to winter performance. So some people say, oh, you know, you're offsetting winter benefit, but there's not a lot there apparently. But as far as the walls are concerned, I think the fundamental question is to what extent is the wall exposed to the sun in summer. I did rent a place where I had a west bedroom with a double brick wall, which was a disaster because, of course, the double brick wall slows the heat flow into the room just for when you're going to bed, you know, and you're sort of thoroughly cooked overnight. So that's where light colours or shading and or both can be very useful. And I think that comes back to the point of shading too. Light coloured shading devices instead of darker ones is a really important thing. And I get annoying phone calls from people who are suffering, and you find that they've got dark coloured internal blinds, which are very effective solar collectors in summer. So the colour of things does matter.
Okay, thanks, Alan. Martin Hames, that was the one we just looked at. Julian Higgs is responding to Louise around the Heble. He says Heble does not have much strength, so would need very good supporting to stay in place. It would not be my first choice. And final question from Spencer Field. Hi, just wondering if and when there might be a battery offer as follow-up to the Mondo solar installation last year. Thank you. Well, Spencer, there is currently a battery offer running. Healesville Core, we're not running that ourselves. We're actually working in conjunction with Solar Savers and the Yarra Ranges Council. So there are a number of councils that have come together, and they have this organisation, as I understand it, called Solar Savers. And Solar Savers has an installation company that will, if you contact them, they will give you a quote, come and visit your place, so can give you a quote on solar panels and or batteries. And if you go onto our website, you can find the information there and click on to Solar Savers, and they will give you a phone call and discuss that with you. Otherwise, contact me, president@healesvillecore.org.au, and I can give you further information as well. And then there's another one from Louise Taylor. Thank you all for answering my question regarding Heble panels. On another point, do we really need to talk about investment and payback regarding solar panels? We never talk about payback on our fridges or cars. Yeah, very good question, I think there, Louise. That's something that I do, particularly for people who think that this is a big cost to put solar panels on their rooftops or to get a heat pump for their hot water. And they're not often thinking about the way in which over a 5 to 7 year period, the system actually pays for itself. So it stops them from investing when they just think of the cost without thinking about what the gain is. So it's just something that I say to people in order to encourage them to think about the investment rather than to think about the cost. Alan?
Yeah, I think particularly now in these days of low interest rates, if you're borrowing money to renovate or buy a home, that is a great time to invest as much as you can in efficiency, solar technologies, and even battery systems, because when you're borrowing at 5% per annum, you will be cash flow positive from the first year if you've borrowed the money as part of a mortgage, and you will be well ahead over the life of the house. And at the same time, there's evidence from around the world that a home that works well and a home with rooftop solar and features like that will typically have a higher resale value, so that there is an asset benefit in there as well.
Well, thanks, Alan. So let's bring that to a close now. There are no more questions, and it's 12:20. Thanks again very much for staying over, Alan and Glenn, and for the other people who are still with us at this meeting. So this webinar has been recorded, as you know, so we will be putting it on our website in the coming week or 10 days, and we'll let you know by email when it's available. There were various references by both Alan and Glenn to various products and websites and so on. So you'll be able to get those from the recorded webinar when you have a look at it. But it's been great to be with you all today, and I thank you. And Tom in the background helping us with our technology, thank you very much for your services today. We appreciate that very much. Don't forget the ABC program on Tuesday night, and keep an eye out for the email from us about the Yarra Ranges webinar next Wednesday that I'll also be talking on with hopefully someone from that ABC program as well, which should be a very interesting event. So take care, and keep in touch with our website for our next event, which will be coming up in a couple of months' time. And look forward to being in touch with you. And feel free to contact Healesville Core if you have any questions about home energy efficiency or about solar panels and batteries and hot water systems. And also, we've got our home energy efficiency advisory service coming up when COVID-19 lockdowns are all finished. Hopefully that won't be too far away, and we'll be able to help you if you get in touch with us about that. So from me and from our speakers, farewell. It's been great to be with you today. Thank you very much.